welcome to the Olathe Spark Starters podcast, where it is our mission to inspire innovative ideas and empower educators to cannonball into personalized professional learning. We're your host, Jordan Billings, 7th grade social studies from Indian Trail Middle School.
And Ryan Stevens, 8th grade social studies from Summit Trail Middle School.
All right, so our goals for this episode is to help listeners understand the importance of multi-age mentorships.
And today our guest is Kaylin Keplinger from Heritage Elementary. Welcome to the podcast. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So I'm Kaylin Keplinger. I currently teach at Heritage Elementary and I teach 4th grade, but this is my 6th year teaching and I've also taught 5th grade and at some other buildings in the district.
Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you. So multi-age mentorships, this is really exciting, getting connections between students at different levels. So how did this project start? Can you tell us a little bit about how it came together?
Yeah, absolutely. So it actually started, I was at a pop-up PD for Nearpod, and I ended up running across Abby Crane, who used to teach at Olathe West High School. And she and I had met each other previously through some PBL collaborations and some other district trainings. And she was an ELA teacher, and she was just talking about how she wished her high schoolers were more creative in their writing and how she just wanted them to have that love for writing. And I was talking about at that elementary level how I loved the creativity that my students were having, but I wish that they would build in more structure and more organization and some of the more grammatical pieces that at the high school level are more of strengths. And after that conversation, we just decided why not give the strengths of the 4th graders and the strengths of the high schoolers and pair up together and see if we could make a project out of it. So it just started from conversation and collaboration, and then after meeting a couple of times, we ended up building a project around it.
That is
awesome.
That's so cool.
So cool.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we see that. You know, sometimes students, as they get older, they start to lose some of that creative energy and that imagination in school. As secondary teachers, we all know.
And to remind ourselves that those elementary kids have things to teach to some of our high school kids that kind of think, oh, I'm older, I remember doing that stuff in elementary, but no, there's still things we can all learn and that we can go back and remember to learn.
Absolutely.
That is very, very cool. So whose idea was it? So it kind of gives us a sense of how this whole thing developed.
I mean, I think I initially had reached out to her to say, can we glean from your high school students? So I think I initially reached out to her, but the whole idea was really created by her. We met at Starbucks over winter break a couple of weeks after that first interaction, and she said, "I have this essential question in my head. Can we make this work as part of this mentorship collaboration?" And the question she had in her head for this overarching unit is, why is it important to hear and tell stories? And I just loved that because it was something so generic, but it was something that I could really dig deep with my 4th graders and our standards and our objectives, and that was something she could take into the high school level as well. So really that initial question was Abby's idea of asking our students, why is it important to hear and tell stories? And then that developed into a unit that we called the Matter of Fiction unit, so kind of a play on words of matter of fact to matter of fiction, because we wanted it to be a creative writing fictional piece and really let both the high school students and the elementary students, as they were learning throughout the Matter of Fiction unit, just run with it. So yeah, that's how the idea kind of got started and ended up being a full unit.
Wow. So when you would do these meetings, what does that actually look like for the people that are maybe wanting to take this idea and actually do it in their classroom? What does that look like?
So once we had the unit put in place and established, we used technology in order to actually make those mentorships happen. And that's just the beauty of having technology in our classrooms. We can reach and stretch outside the 4 walls of our own classrooms, of our own buildings, and reach other people, not only in our district, but even in other states or across the world. Our first year, we used the Skype for Business app. And we actually were able to put those on all of our student iPads or student laptops at the high school level. And the interactions were very planned, very scripted at first from Abby and myself. So that way the high schoolers and the 4th graders were really honing in on speaking and listening and getting to know each other. And especially with 4th graders, learning how to collaborate with the high schoolers, and high schoolers learning how to mentor and teach younger students, which was a huge skill that they were gaining from this as well.
I mean, think about that. I mean, that's hard on all of those levels. I mean, and you can imagine that, like, I'm liking how you're saying that you're, like scripting that out. So then you're kind of giving them that framework that they need, because the skill itself is hard, let alone not having a framework to go with. It's awesome.
Absolutely. And we thought if we start, especially that first year, because this happened 3 years ago and the project has grown since then tremendously, but starting just that first year, we thought if we really have a framework and see what works, then we can grow that in future years. So yeah, the Skype app was wonderful that first year. We were able to have them call each other at very specific times during the school day. However, because we had to be very strategic with planning, we've now transitioned into a new app that wasn't available, or we weren't familiar with 3 years ago, called the Flipgrid app. So
Flipgrid,
yes, I would highly recommend Flipgrid to any teacher who's wanting to stretch outside the four walls of their classroom or their building, looking for mentorships, or just any expert in any field. Flipgrid is amazing because you can ask for video responses, but you don't have to be on the iPad or using technology at the same time.
Oh, that's cool.
Which has been a huge benefit doing the project 3 years later with the high school teachers over at Olathe West.
So that's like, because you're saying like with Skype, like, okay, hey, we've got, this hour, so between like 11 and 11:20, that's when we have to do this. You've got to make that happen. But then imagine if you have a kid that's sick, and then you don't want them to not be able to take advantage of this awesome opportunity. But then you're like, with Flipgrid, you can just, okay, this is our time to record our video, and then you'll see your response come in later, and you don't have to do it at the same time. That sounds awesome.
Absolutely, much more flexible.
Sounds like, too, with Flipgrid, as from a teacher perspective there's even an opportunity for a little bit of mentorship, too, so you can help students how to give good feedback, because the teachers can see it on Flipgrid, too, if I'm right about it, too.
Yes, that's correct.
That's really great. So did every class have the same writing prompts, or was it different prompts? How did that work?
So we did end up using that same initial writing prompt, the why is it important to hear and tell stories prompt. But we addressed the question in a couple of different ways. Obviously, 9th grade and 10th grade English standards are going to be much different than 4th grade standards, but we did notice a lot of trends, teaching things like developing a character or theme or story plot or story elements more at the elementary level. So we were teaching into our own separate standards, but then we were also noticing lots of trends, and even just within the collaboration that students were able to share and learn high school to 4th grade and 4th grade up to the high school level as well.
Nice. Okay. So how do you measure success when you're taking a look at a project like this?
So when I thought about success with this, I mean, ultimately, this all really started with Abby talking about, I want my students to have a love for writing. And I wanted my 4th graders to continue that and grow with that as well. So ultimately, that first sign of success for me was watching how much excitement and how much joy in my own classroom that my students had collaborating with a high school mentor, writing and doing creative writing outside of our, quote, writing time during our day. They started to collaborate with one another, with their peers. Throughout this whole process, and we could just see their excitement growing, and from that excitement they were wanting to learn more from each other, from myself, from their high school buddies, which truly was wonderful. And as that excitement continued to grow, this project has been able to grow from that. So as we've continued moving into the current year, we have 3 teachers at Heritage Elementary in 4th grade that have this project that they're doing, in addition to 2 Olathe West high school teachers. So I think the fact that this project has grown so much over the last 3 years, and there's still enjoyment and excitement and engagement from the students, I think it's been very successful for the students and just for us to watch it as well.
Wow. So if you were to try to think about one particular thing about this project that makes it meaningful for your students and for Abby's students, what would it be? If you were to pick like the top thing, what would it be?
I think it was really meaningful for the students. At the very end, there was a symposium that was hosted at Olathe West High School. And so the students, the high school students, and then the elementary students were invited to share their pieces as true authors. They'd been working on a creative writing piece throughout this whole process. and collaborating with their buddies along the way. And at the end, there was a big symposium one evening, and elementary schoolers were invited to come. Most of the high schoolers were there, and it was an opportunity for an authentic audience. Parents, staff members, district members, people from the community were able to come in and listen to the high schoolers and the fourth graders read their stories and share their stories. And that was really a night to watch. As a teacher, I watched my students take ownership of their writing, and they had a real audience to read their stories to. They were putting their pieces out into the world, which was very meaningful for the parents who were watching their kids do this, for me watching them do it, and that just really solidified it for me. I think it was very meaningful for the students that night.
I love the idea of that, and like increasing the stakeholders and things like that, and bringing the parents in and getting to see that, like, hey, this is what we do. And you've mentioned it several times in this podcast of going outside of the four walls, and to say that, like, basically taking it to that next level. That's what's really making this meaningful, that it's not just, this is just an assignment for my class and I'm going to do it and I'm going to get a grade and things like that. But I think that's where you said taking ownership and saying, like, this is something that I created, and not even just something that, like, I just kind of did it and whatever to check the box or whatever. Like, I'm going to make this, I'm working with somebody to do this, and then I get to show it to the world. Not even just like, my one teacher to get my check mark or sticker. Do we do stickers?
Yeah, stickers, or even just the grade. Or
I mean, we all love stickers. Let's be honest.
Yes,
we do all love
stickers.
Yes.
But seeing that real world, that's a whole new level.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's just huge. And I think about just kind of the lifelong learners that you've created from that statement. And I'm certain you've got kids who are going to talk about this for years, that this is one of their favorite projects. But I think also you're developing wonderful love of not only writing, but I'm certain you're going to have kids now who are going to start to love reading even more, because they know what they like to write and they know what kind of creative stories they're hearing. So they're going to start to figure out what books they love reading, and that's just going to pay dividends for them in the future. That's incredible. There's so much here we can learn. So if listeners want to learn more from you, where can they find you online?
If they're looking for me online, I do have a Twitter, so it's at K.E. Keplinger, and they're welcome to see what's going on in my classroom, learn more about this collaboration that weve been talking about.
Follow it along that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, thank you. And before we kind of wrap up, we usually like to have section of the show here talking about other Spark Starters that we see, and we would love to see from you somebody in the district that you think is a Spark Starter.
Oh man, there's so many awesome people to choose from. I mentioned earlier I have an awesome team at Heritage who has jumped on this project with me. I know that Will Showalter over at Olathe West jumped in last year, but I wanted to give a special shout out to Reed Buckstead, who is my partner this year through Flipgrid with his high school students. He was new to the district this year, and when he came in, he just dove right in and was willing to work and ready to go, and it's been really fun to collaborate with him. So I would say he's definitely a Spark Starter for Olathe.
Awesome. Well, that kind of brings us to the end of this podcast. So, Kaylin, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was awesome. So, I'm Jordan Billings, 7th grade, Indian Trail Middle School.
I'm Ryan Stevens, 8th grade Social Studies at Summit Trail Middle School. And until next time, keep sparking innovation.